So hi everyone, thank you for coming for our scientific writing workshop here today. Today we have been graced with Yong Shin Jie to give us a talk on his experience with scientific writing. But before that, I would like to let everyone know regarding MBIOS's new program. So here we have the MBIOS member certificate. So here basically for every talk that you attend or every article that you have submitted, it will be counted as one event slash article, and basically accumulatively through tiering with 3 events, 5 events, and 10 events, you can submit to us your evidences that you have attended these events. And if you have submitted an article, it would be an article that has been published on our MBIOS website, which you can go ahead and check later on. And basically, you just have to pay a one-time payment of either 5 ringgit or £1, and respectively you can get the bronze, silver, and gold certificate. The registration link is over here. Later it will be posted into the chat box for everyone to have a look at. So I won't waste anyone's time already, and then we can move on. So next on here, we have our speaker. We have Yong Shin Jie, who has completed his Master's in Life Sciences Neuro at Sunway University. He's currently an independent and contracted science writer at Medium and Newsbreak. And he's also a freelance writer and coach and editor. So with that, I will pass it over to Shin Jie.
Thank you, Sujin, for the kind introduction. And welcome everybody, welcome everyone here. And I'm incredibly honored to be here to give this talk today. Okay, so the title of my talk is Approaches to Writing and Publishing Literature Reviews. So first, I'll give a brief outline of what you'll gain from this presentation. So I will guide you guys through how to identify and open or novel research topics to write about. I will elaborate on some writing tips and resources, and I will show you how I create scientific diagrams with PowerPoint. And when I arrive here, I will switch PowerPoint slides to show how I create diagrams with another file. Then I will show how to find suitable journals with a good impact factor that is free to publish in. And lastly, I will guide you through how to contact the journal editor and passing the peer review process. Okay, so first let's begin with this video. It's by Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's quite famous, so some of you might know who he is. By showing this video, my intention is not to promote him or anything, because I know that he can be quite a controversial figure, but I would like to just share what he has to say about writing.
The best thing you can do is teach people to write, because there's no difference between that and thinking. And one of the things that just blows me away about universities is that no one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignment. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need the grade. It's like, no, you need to learn to think, because thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake. And those could be battles for good things. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. So that's why you learn to write. It's like, I can't believe that people aren't just told that. It's like, it's the most powerful weapon you could possibly provide someone with.
Yeah, so Dr. Peterson said that the best thing you can do is to teach people to write, because there's no difference between that and thinking. So in other words, he meant that writing is formalized thinking. So by putting your ideas into words, you can actually bring your ideas into reality. And if you think about it, that's actually the most basic forms of communication. So why you should listen to me about writing. So first, I've published a few papers, most of them as the first author, including a few systematic reviews and meta-analysis that I just got into recently. And my papers have also been cited a good amount. And aside from scientific writing, I'm also experienced in science writing. So the difference between scientific and science writing is that scientific are generally for academia, whereas science writing is generally for the general audience. So aside from scientific writing, I'm also a science writer of Medium, where I've self-published more than almost 300 articles. Yeah, here are just some examples of recent ones. And aside from Medium, I'm also a contracted reporter at Newsbreak, where I mainly republish my work from Medium over here, but in a shorter news format. Okay, so let's begin with part 1, how to identify open or nuanced or which is synonymous with novel research topics to write about. So first, they say, become a writer, they say it'll be fun, they said. You have to read this much in the initial stages, but there's an easier way to bypass this, but most likely you said to read this much, but I'll show you an easier way how to read this much. So first, one of the easiest way is to read the latest papers, both reviews and original papers. Original papers means those papers that have original data, they have basically experimental data or mathematical data that is new, whereas review papers are generally an overview of the research area. So read the latest on both sides. By reading the latest is the easiest way to update yourself in what is going on in the research topic. And while you update yourself at that, you should ask what is the problem and also how can the problem be addressed. This problem is basically the research gap in the field. And you always want to find research gaps in the field, basically to find problems in the field. Otherwise, why write if you don't have a problem to write about? Identifying a problem is the easiest way to know what to write about, basically. And identifying a problem to write about is also, it signifies novelty. And the more unique or novel the paper is in terms of its contribution to the literature, the higher the chances of your paper getting accepted by a journal or by a news outlet or anything. Because if you put yourself in the editor's shoes, why would they want an article that has been written elsewhere before? They want something that's different and, more importantly, significant. But obviously, there's nothing wrong with writing similar reviews. You can always tweak a little bit. You can use a different structure compared to previously published reviews. You can create better diagrams, better table. You can give an updated information on a topic. Let's say if you're writing a general topic about cancer, about heart cancer, for example, and the last review is written, I don't know, 2 to 3 years ago, you can give an updated feel of the area, focusing on the research that has been done, like a continuation of review. That's one option. Or you could put more focus on a particular area. But importantly, what you want to do is to convince them is basically the editors, why your paper is different and important. Basically, you have to sell your paper. I'll show you how I identify open research topics. So in one of my early papers titled The Hippocampal Vulnerability to Herpes Simplex Virus Type 1 Infection. It's a complicated topic, but it's a niche topic where I mentioned that, first I give a brief introduction in the field, but I mentioned that, however, a neuroanatomical standpoint of HSV1, the virus tropism in the brain, has not been emphasized in detail. Because generally review papers in this topic, they focus on the mechanism of neurodegeneration. They focus on the epidemiological aspects where the virus increases the risks of Alzheimer's and stuff like that. But so far, no reviews other than mine, at least at that point in time, have written about the tropism of this virus in the brain in depth. So that's why I wrote about this review, because it's new. It takes a different perspective, and it put more emphasis on the tropism area of the research topic rather than a very broad research paper or a review article. Okay, another example is this titled "The Rare Adverse Events Associated with this is the commercial code name for the Pfizer mRNA vaccine, a review of large-scale controlled surveillance studies." And I wrote this review because I mentioned in the abstract that this review concisely summarized the current rare adverse events related and unrelated to the vaccine, arguably for the first time in sufficient depth to better communicate vaccine safety to the public. So if I look at this research field of vaccine safety, most of them focus on the rare adverse events that are associated with the vaccine. Things like myocarditis are a popular one, but they generally don't dive in depth to the rare adverse events that is not associated with the vaccine. So in this review, I provided a very broad scope, because most review papers, they provide a narrow scope this time. So it's the important point is to have your paper different from the others. Here are more examples. This is a very broad article about long COVID. It's pathophysiology, risk factors, and treatments. But at least at that point, I write this paper, which is almost 2 years ago. I mentioned that there is limited literature discussing this topic, which the current review aims to address. But reviews like this are becoming very common. So if you want to write reviews like this now, the chances of it getting accepted is very low because there are just too many similar reviews. But when I wrote this review at that time, there wasn't much. That's why it's actually my best cited paper at over 600 citations. Because at that time it was different. It was a novel research topic, even though it's a broad one. And so I mentioned that at this time, if you write a general review about long COVID, it probably won't get accepted. That's why now I have to narrow down the scope. So here I wrote a review about the subtypes of long COVID, where I mentioned that in the abstract, well, the pathophysiological mechanism of PCS is post-COVID syndrome or long COVID, have been extensively described elsewhere. The subtypes of PCS have not. So rather than a very general topic about long COVID, now I narrow down to the subtypes, which has not been written before, at least at the time of writing this paper. And then, yeah, it got accepted in a good journal. Yeah, this is also about long COVID, where I also narrowed down the scope this time. I narrowed down to the biomarkers in post-COVID syndrome or long COVID, where I mentioned that our review pinpointed certain biomarkers associated with long COVID, and which may shed light on potential new approaches to understanding, diagnosis, and treating PCS. Yeah, this review topic is also narrow in scope about biomarkers specifically. It's not a journal topic about long COVID. That's why it got accepted, because it's a narrow in scope that has not been addressed before. And last example is a paper I just submitted recently. It's also a systematic review and meta-analysis, this time on vaccine safety, this time on post-vaccine POTS. POTS is a postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Yeah, where we perform a systematic review to discern what is currently known about this condition, arguably for the first time in the published literature. And this is quite a broad review topic because now because post-vaccine POTS is actually a recently discovered thing. That's why there's basically almost zero reviews about it. So I try to get in early and get this paper done. It's a very broad topic. But again, broad topic works if the research topic is actually novel. But if broad topics are already very common, try to narrow down the scope. That's how you find an open research topics or research ideas to write about. And before I show you further how I find, those are just examples. I will show you how I find those ideas, research ideas to write about. Here are some useful PubMed operators that you have to know, especially the highlighted one if you're using PubMed. First is N, which is simple, which is X and Y, or either X or Y. Not is useful, but I don't really use it. TUP means title/abstract, means the specific keyword in the title abstract. EI is just title. I don't really use it because it's just too narrow. All is all fields. But if you don't enter TUP by default, it's all fields. So I don't use it also, but it's good to know. PT is publication type. You can use this command to filter out review papers, which I'll show you later how. PD is publication date. Not that important, I think. TA is journal. So if you want to look for Nature, for example, you can key in Nature with this TA command. It'll give you articles that is published in Nature. LA is language. Genre is English, so I don't really use it. A is author. And you can find the more details in this website. So the first example is that, okay, let's say I want to know what is known about long COVID generally. So I'll key in post-COVID syndrome. TUP means title abstract or long COVID. TUP, title abstract. And I want review. So publication type, review PT. They give me about 200 results. Means that just a few months ago, I think I made these slides a few months ago. The reviews on long COVID has already exceeded 200. So if you want to write a journal review about long COVID, it's going to be quite difficult unless you narrow down the scope. Yeah, so if I If I just add in further keywords in the middle, I add subtype. Basically, I add subtype over here, and I find review about long COVID subtype. It's only one result, which was actually my paper. But if I add a similar keyword, I add phenotype or subtype. There are 7 papers about reviews on subtype phenotypes of long COVID. But you have to understand that since I didn't put T up over here, means it's all fields, means that the subtype and phenotype can be found anywhere in the article, be the methods, discussion, or introduction, because I didn't narrow down the keyword in the title or abstract by the T up command. So most of these results are actually not related, at least not directly related to review of subtypes of long COVID. Yeah, so that's how I manipulated keywords to find something that has not been written before. Another example is that, if I want to write a review or a paper about lactoferrin, the effects or the influence of lactoferrin in Alzheimer's or Parkinson's diseases, I will enter a journal keywords in using the TM command, title abstract. Oh yeah, it gave me 100 results. If I want to filter it by review, means I only want review papers. But if you don't want review papers, you can replace the N with not, NOT. But in this case, I want the review. They give me 21 results. If I further narrow down the scope to mechanism or action, means that basically I want a review on the mechanism or mode of action of lactoferrin in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. They give me 8 results. But again, in these 8 results, most of them are not directly related to the topic, because lactoferrin also somehow function as a drug carrier into the brain. So that's why you see things like curcumin, that it doesn't even mention lactoferrin. And here they mention lipid conjugated with something, which is not exactly related to lactoferrin. So most of these 8 results are not directly related either. So this is also how I know that a review on the mechanism of lactoferrin or the neuroprotective mechanism of lactoferrin in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's is an open research topic that I can write about, which I already did, by the way, so don't steal my topic away from me. It's gonna get published soon. Okay, so last example. So again, I want to know what's in the literature about long COVID in journal. So I just enter a brief a journal keyword, and I got almost 3,000 results. But if I narrow down to biomarker or marker or level, which is like almost keywords related to biomarker, I get 250 results. And if I further narrow down by the review, means I only want review papers on this topic, I get 39 results, which is already a drastic decrease from your 3,000 results. So you also know that the review on the biomarkers in long COVID, there's some papers done, but it's still a decent number, because most of the papers here, again, will not be related to it. Like the first one is like long COVID syndrome, physical mental interplay in the spotlight. So it doesn't even mention it's not about biomarker at all. So at least half of this will not be related to the biomarker topic, which again signifies its novelty. Yeah, so basically that's how you find open research topics. You narrow down the scope if you have to. Yeah, but what I mean if you have to is that, again, I repeated the point that if the research topic is novel, you don't have to narrow down the scope that much. But if the research topic is something that has been researched for quite a while, then you have to narrow down the scope. So moving on to part 2, it'll be about writing tips and resources. So what's being a writer like? What my friends think I do? I just chill all the time. Yeah, maybe that's true. I just chill in my desk most of the time. What your mom thinks you do, which is your baby in her eyes. What society thinks you do, which is being a writer is cool, stuff like that. What your editor thinks you do, you just sleep all the time because you are just so late in submitting your article. And what do you think you do? You think you're a badass, but what you actually do is just stressing at the desk. Yeah, but to reduce the stress in the desk, I have some tips for you on writing to ensure that your writing process will be smooth. So first, you want to avoid, as the usual general advice, to avoid long, complicated, or redundant sentences. But sometimes long, complicated sentences are necessary to explain difficult concepts. But the most important thing you have to look out for is redundant sentences. Redundant sentences are usually the ones that kill your writing. So how to identify redundancy is that if you notice that if you repeat the same points here and there, you don't have to. If you can cut 2 paragraphs into one, if you can cut 2 sentences into one, then by all means do it. Don't try to explain a point more than necessary. Try to get to the point basically. And to avoid redundancy, I think that's the best way, but you come with practice. Initially, when I started writing, I write redundant sentences all the time. But as you write more, you'll be able to identify them more effectively. You should prioritize your structure and flow over information, quantity, and vocabulary. So basically, the flow, how your paragraphs read and how your sentences connect to one another is more important than the amount of information you can provide. And you don't need fancy vocabulary either. Simple English is good enough. So this means that sometimes you see a new paper, oh, I have to include this in my review. But if that comes at the cost of disrupting the flow of the paragraph, then don't do it. Because in the review, I don't think you can cover everything in the review. So prioritize the structure and flow more over the quantity of information that you're giving. Editing is key. Usually paper gets better with every round of editing. You can use Grammarly or citation tools. And Grammarly is very helpful to me because my grammar is very bad. So I can use Grammarly to catch your grammar errors. And citation tools like Mendeley or EndNote, so that you don't make mistakes in your citation, and it's very convenient. And one of the best way to learn is to learn by example. That's why I give examples of how I find research topics in the previous slides. But I can read good examples of review papers in like good journals. Journals like Nature, Cell, Neuron, Trends in Neurosciences, or Trends in Pharmacological something, but Trends in something, they are generally good journals. The British Medical Journal, etc. It's controversial, but they can use Sci-Hub or LibGen to access to pirate the text if your institution have no access to it. But sometimes the paper is new, they wouldn't have it in Sci-Hub so fast. Then you can try to find the full text in ResearchGate, where you can try to request the full text from the researcher. Usually they will give, but if they are not in ResearchGate, you can just email the corresponding author directly. And usually in papers, they will leave an email of the corresponding author. You can just find the email of the paper and email the author. And in my experience, if you're polite and ask for the paper, they usually give it to you. Oh yeah, and practice is key. Read and write often. So just like you want to learn a new musical instrument, practice is always a key. No amount of teaching can help unless you practice and practice and practice. Yeah, so here are some quality papers examples of quality papers that you can read if you're in this field. So this is from Nature. This is from Trends in Microbiology. This is in BMJ, British Medical Journal, and this is in Cell and Bioscience. Yeah, so these are usually related to neuroscience, which are except long COVID. But since I'm in the neuroscience fields, I do start with these papers, especially these two, where I actually read the paper in depth and try to figure out how they craft their sentences and paragraphs. And another free writing academic resource you can use is Academic Phrase Bank. Just Google Academic Phrase Bank and you should find it as the first results. This is the website, phrasebank.manchester.ak.uk. But just Google it, you'll find it. So here they provide alternative phrases to your for your use. So here they provide phrases that if you want to phrases or devices that distance the author from a proposition. Means that they want phrases that tone down your statement. So this is useful if you want to write something that is not confirmed, like a hypothesis or suggestion or a potential implication, something that is not factual yet. You can say that it is believed that it is reported that COVID can cause this and that, or it has commonly been assumed that, etc., etc. Yeah, so this kind of statements, they tone down your statement. So here another useful one. There's a lot of examples. You can just explore them in this phrase bank website. So here they give you phrases on how to restate the aims of your study, and here they give you phrases on how to suggest implications for the field of knowledge. So things like this, the study results indicate that these findings suggest that, etc., etc. And yeah, you can use ChatGPT also. It's a very popular AI Google. No, it's a very popular AI chat box. But the way I see it is just an advanced version of Google. So for example, if you ask them what topics about long COVID that has not been given much attention in the scientific literature, they give you answers, which are good answers. But since an AI, they don't have the conscious mind to discern what is right and wrong. So some of the points they give are actually incorrect. So you still have to, don't take them word by word. You can take them into consideration. So it gave us 5 research ideas. I mean, ChatGPT gave me 5 research ideas about long COVID. First one is actually a good one, long COVID in vulnerable populations like people with low socioeconomic status or people with disabilities. This is quite a good suggestion because I don't see reviews that wrote about long COVID in people with disabilities or people with immunocompromised immune system or people with organ transplant. They're immunocompromised. I don't see them quite often. But number 2 is, I don't think it's correct because there's already a wealth of literature that studies how mild cases of COVID leads to long COVID, but maybe not asymptomatic. How asymptomatic cases of COVID can lead to long COVID can be a good review to read about, but definitely not mild cases. It has been studied a lot. Long COVID in healthcare workers has been studied a lot. The role of immune system in long COVID, there's also a lot of reviews about that. The impact of long COVID on mental health. You can consider this, but I think I've seen a few reviews about this also. So yeah, so the point is you can take what ChatGPTs suggest into consideration, but don't take them word by word. And here there are some little things about writing. Yeah, you can read the introduction or discussion sections of a recent original paper to get ideas, because usually, or recent review papers. Now, I think original papers are better because usually original papers, their introduction are shorter than their introduction is a short literature review that they can gauge what's going on in the field quickly by reading the introduction of the original paper. And you can then read the discussion of the original paper where they can suggest, usually they will suggest like research gaps in the field, limitations of their paper, and things that require further studies. Usually it's always in the discussion of the original paper, then you can always take some ideas from there. And yeah, just go from there. That's why in one of the early slides, I said read the latest original paper and review paper to get an idea of what's going on in the field. It's actually the fastest way rather than starting with the review that is written back in 2010 or 2020, 2005. Start with the recent ones. And you can always find more relevant citations from reviews or original paper. So let's say if you're stuck writing, and if you need to look for more resources on a particular statement or paragraph, you can always just go to the review that elaborate on this and just pick citations from there. Usually they have done all the hard work. They have done all the hard work in compiling the citation. You can just hop in and take some, which is what I do all the time. But make sure you don't take everything from one paper. You can take here and there so that it doesn't constitute plagiarism. And always cite the original source you can. Original source means the original paper that first discovered something that you mentioned in your paper. So let's say if you say the COVID virus SARS-CoV-2 bind to the ACE2 receptor, try to find the original paper that show this. There is actually. It's quite easy to find. You just have to backtrack 2 to 3 times. Don't go into the habit of citing review, then that review cite another review, then that review cite another review, then you're not actually giving credit to the right team of people. And always go to the primary source rather than secondary source. Because if you go through secondary source, you are taking their interpretation of the original source, which can be biased. So you don't want to, I don't want that to happen. So it's always go back to the original or primary source. Save PDF as the first author at all, and then the year and then title. This is just what I do so that it helps my memory. So I kind of know what kind of paper I'm reading, because the best way to have a good memory is to interact with the material. So I actually type down the author and the title paper, then I roughly know what kind of paper I'm saving to my file. Then I can always go back if I have to. Yeah, you can use subheadings up to 3 levels. Usually 3 levels are the max by journal standards. So something like 1 introduction, and then 1.1, and then 1.1.1, 1.1.2, and so on. Trying to just up to 3 levels. This helps you to organize your ideas with more clarity. And if you notice, if you notice that your paragraphs or sentences are getting too repetitive, or it's like always similar information, like this compound inhibit cancer, compound B also inhibit cancer, compound Z also inhibit cancer, then it's time for a table. Use a table for that. You can also use a figure to illustrate the overall picture of your paper. Creating a figure is harder to do, but it can be done. I will show you how later. And get another person to read it. So because if you write the paper, you keep reading the paper yourself, sometimes you miss basic stuff that people can spot easily. Sometimes you are just blind to our own ideas and stuff. So it's always better to get another co-author to read it. So we are moving on to part 3, where I show you how I create my scientific diagrams. Yeah, when you think about scientific diagrams, you might want to use BioRender, Illustrator, or Photoshop. These are advanced skills that is good if you know how to use them. But if you don't know how to use them, just PowerPoint is enough. I'll show you how. So in PowerPoint, you can, PowerPoint allows you to change different colors and gradient. You can use the eyedropper function to pick a color so that it's consistent. You can use different kind of lines, curved lines, or straight lines. You can use the background image, the image background remover tool. You can change the color, align, and group objects and everything. So it's easy enough to create a diagram. Yeah, I'll show examples, which is another file. Yeah, another thing is that I can mix and match different figures from various papers, so you can get inspiration of of a scientific figure from this paper and get inspiration from another paper, and then just mix them. This is what I do all the time to get an ideas of how to be creative. And usually journals want you to have a 300 dpi resolution image. So how you can do this is to export the PowerPoint as PDF and open the PDF with Illustrator and export as 300 dpi. Yeah, for this you need Illustrator. The only purpose I have Illustrator is to export the PDF file as a 300 dpi image. It's very easy. All you have to do is to either pay for the Illustrator or find the correct version. And then other tools that are free, no, I don't think it's free. BioRender is not free, it used to be free. But Inkscape is free. Illustrator can be free if you can find the correct version. Yeah, these are other tools, but for me, PowerPoint is enough. Okay, so this is a figure that I published on my paper. So yeah, it's a lot of elements. All of this group, so I can just backtrack. This is a brief example. So I can just ungroup them first. Group. Yeah, this actually made a lot of very simple, a lot of tiny details that you just assemble together. So if I zoom in, this thing is actually just an icon. You can just Google like icon of virus in Google, and you can just copy paste it here. Yeah, but to avoid copyright issues, you can just change the color. So if you take this, go to picture format, you can just manipulate the colors. Maybe you can make it dark blue. You can just manipulate the colors, color change to dark blue. Yeah, to avoid copyright issues. And this kind of thing, you can actually draw them with PowerPoint. Let's say, yeah, this brain is an icon. Just find an icon in the Google image and try to manipulate the colors. But this kind of things, simple structure like this, simple. When you have too many items. Yeah, simple items like this you can draw with the with some kind of scribble, not scribble. Yeah, freeform shape. So I just a freeform shape like that. It's not exactly good at the first try, but you can after that you can just edit the shape. You can edit the points. Then you can just slightly curve them, move them up a bit, and just slowly trace. But the best way to do this is to bring it over here. I try to bring a template you can find in Google or some other images, bring a template, and you can just slowly edit the points by tracing. It takes time, but it definitely works, especially if you're not a pro illustrator. So I can just slowly trace them. Yeah, but you get the point. I'll waste a lot of time doing this. So let's proceed. And this is just the gradient. Having a gradient is actually nice because it makes your paper look like the standard of quality that you always see in good papers like the Nature. So to have gradient, you just have to go to shade fill. Shade fill, can go gradient, and always pick the center gradient from center, because in my experience, from center is always the best, whereas from the side it kind of looks a bit weird, I think. So always try to pick gradient colors. So gradient from center. Then you can further adjust by clicking more gradients. More gradient you can adjust. You can just insert a color here. You can change the gradient slightly. Yeah, so if I want to change the gradient of this color, let's say I want to make it the same as my brown one, I can use the eyedropper function. Eyedropper, pick the brown one. Yeah. And you can use the eyedropper function. You can pick the light brown. So it's like consistent with this. Yeah, so that's how you play with the gradient, color change, and eyedropper function. So it kind of look nice. So here I color coded it. Brown is for the oral infection route, green is for the eye infection route, and the pink is for the nasal infection route. Yeah, so over here is also a gradient where I color coded it. Yeah, where the green is the basic established pathways of tropism, or pathways of infection, and the brown one are potential pathways of infection that is not as established as the original. But obviously you have to explain this in your paper. And so here is more figures. So how I create this is that so if I just ungroup this group and ungroup. So again, it's made up of a lot of little things. So but the key parts are this brainstem, because this kind of thing you can just Google brain icon, gastrointestinal icon, and just take the icon. They just mix from two. So just be creative. And from how I do is that I change all the colors into the same color. So I just go to picture format, color. Maybe this time I can, this is the original image. But if you want to avoid copyright issues, you better change so this is the original image, you better change the color. So you can change, this time you can change to, let's see. I can change to green maybe, green, and you can change this to green also. Change it to green. Yeah, the same with the brand, you can change it to green just to make them consistent. Yeah, this is the original image over here, no recolor, but obviously I have to change color, otherwise I'll breach copyright. Yeah, this is just icon. This brainstem I took from an image. You can, I don't think I have the original. Yeah, if I discard all changes, yeah, basically I use the background removal to remove all the little background at the back. So I can just have this part that I want. So it's the same, I use this part for this. This is basically just recolored version. So if I go to their picture, I think this is crop. Yeah, I just crop this into half and that into half and connect the two. If I want to have like one color at one side, different color at the other side to illustrate certain points. Like red means more severe, light means not that severe. And can I use gradient tool and a rectangular box, use a gradient not from center, but link from the right to the left. Yeah, I can use gradient this way. And the same thing with over here. This is basically icons that I just change color to blue. And these also icon. And these little things, they are just shapes that I draw. You can adjust the shape, just like that, just like that. Just put it here. And just put it here. Yeah, to symbolize like microthrombosis. It's good enough. And this kind of just little balls, different color, just to signal inflammatory mediators. Yeah, so here's an example. I took this image from this Pinterest website. So what you can do is that you zoom in as much as you can maybe. Yeah, zoom into this much. So you go to picture format, remove background. And just first you can mark areas you want to keep. So I'm gonna keep this downside. Okay, I keep this, and I keep this. And do that, like that. You can just drop it over here. And here again. Yeah, it takes a bit of patience. Okay, then that's good enough. But these lines will be hard to get rid, because if you get rid of this, you just leave an empty spot. So maybe what I can do is that we replace the line maybe. So I just go to insert shape, a straight line. I just insert here. I can label them myself maybe. Shape outline is black. Weight increase to 3 points. And then you can cover up the image. You can cover up, and we can label them yourself. The color of this. So you go to picture format, color, and change it to some basic color that you won't get caught. Yeah, change it to this. Add some, deepen the contrast. Yeah, and use correction to deepen the contrast. You can get it over here. If you want it more darker, you can make it more darker. If you want to make it lighter, you can just make it lighter. So somewhere here. Yeah, so that looks like, or your original image, you will just add your labeling here, add something at the background, so that it can become, so they can become like this. So that's how you manipulate images with PowerPoint. Same thing with neuron. This is an icon that I get online. Just Google icon of neurons and you get this, just copy paste. What I can do is that picture format. You can change the color. Change it to, change the blue maybe. And you want to remove the background. The mark areas to keep, just do this. Mark some areas to keep. Keep them slowly. Not perfect enough, but it's okay. But generally you want to remove the white background, because if you remove the white background, it's much easier to design with. Because if you have the white background, let's say you want to put something over here, you already remove the white background. But if you have the white background, this thing will be cut off. So if I just discard all changes, this thing will be cut off. So I cannot actually use image to mix and match if they have a white background. So it always best to remove the background. And so you can even create simple figures like this. That's actually good enough. So this is just a structure that I take online, structure of lactal frame. This is an icon. This is an icon, but I just rescale them. Basically, it looks about the same size, but I just manipulate the size so they look two different image. And this thing is just like little components. I zoom in. So this thing is just like little components. This thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing over here. This is an icon, and this is an image, one image. I just join them together. But I took this from another paper. So I go to remove. I remove background from this and just join them together. Maybe I can change the color also. I can change it to, even gold works. So just copy paste and you get another one. I can delete the back one. Maybe you can delete this one and just put it over here. Get another different receptor. So I use this component over here. So we look at this, it's basically a different components. If I just group, how much time I have? I need to speak. So if this is just, you can just piece together one by one, slowly. So this is just an oval. That's how you create a nucleus. When I create an oval shape, put the gradient from the center, and then the oval shape, a gradient from the center, and just put it here. Now this DNA is an icon. So just put it here. This is a cell, this is a nucleus, and this is the DNA. And I can get a nucleus. This is an image or an icon that I forgot, but I just change color. That's basically it. This is an image that I just change color, and these things are just a bunch of cylinders that I just mix and match to resemble aggregation. Okay, so these are just some examples I can do with PowerPoint. And here is basically just a different rectangle, and this I just get from some other sources that I change color. Just copy paste them. Again, these are nucleus that I just get. I think these nucleus I draw, but I somehow paste them as image, I think. And here is just a bunch of gradient. This one is from left to right, and use different colors to symbolize different things. So from light brown to dark brown symbolize asymptomatic to critical. And this image you can just get from FreePic. FreePic is, yeah, it's good to know about FreePic. I forgot to include in the slides, but FreePic provides you like free corporated image that you can use to modify. So you get this image from FreePic, but obviously I give credit in the review paper that I said that the human image is obtained from FreePic, something like that. This is basically just a flow diagram of my systematic review, just boxes with numbers. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Okay, so let's move on to part 4 about searching suitables with an impact factor. Don't just go blindly and have your manuscript rejected at the end. You can use SciMyGo, so just Google SciMyGo, you'll find it, and go to journal ranks. And journal ranks, you can just put a broad subject about neuroscience first. And if you see this kind of thing, they symbolize open access. But if there's no such thing, it means it's a hybrid journal. And hybrid journal gives you optional open access where you can choose to publish your paper behind the paywall or open access to everybody. But hybrid journals are the journals that you can publish for free. But sometimes, sometimes specific topics are not in the subject areas, you have to find it in the subject categories. So if things like epidemiology is only in the subject category, so try to play with this too. Oh yeah, and Q1 means that it's a Q1 ranking. There's Q1 to Q4. Q1 is obviously the best. It symbolizes top 25% of journal. So let's say I want to publish in epidemiology, I can try to look for a lower ranking Q1. Lower ranking Q1 means that the journal is maybe harder, easier to get into. So I can identify two candidate journals that I might want to get into. So to do that, first I have to go to their website for their author guidelines to see if they accept any review papers or not and what's their condition. Because most review papers, they want words around 4,000 to 5,000, they cap it there, and references around 100 sometimes. So just go to their website and look for the information for authors or guide for authors. And if you deem your papers are suitable, now just go to PubMed. Oh yeah, Q1 journals generally have a good impact factor. Let's go to PubMed. So this is where the TA comes in handy. TA is the journal. So if you want to find papers published in this journal, just type Journal of Clinical Epidemiology, TA, and review, publication time, and vaccine. I have 6 results, means that this journal do publish review papers on vaccine. It's a good thing. Another candidate journal is epidemiology, but there's only 2 results, and most of them looks at theory or mathematics, which is not what my paper is about. So from this, I can tell that Journal of Clinical Epidemiology is better suited for my paper than the epidemiology journal. So again, the best way to judge is judge by examples. So another area is toxicology. Yes, so I look for lower ranking Q1. 8 is high, but I can try. And Q2, there's toxicology. So if I just go to PubMed, yeah, so I just do drug safety, the TA journal, and toxicology TA journal, and compare the 2. And from the looks of it, drug safety, the journal drug safety publish more reviews on vaccine than toxicology. So the chances of getting into the journal may be higher. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that because they already publish a lot, they may not want review on vaccines anymore. Then maybe they can go for this. Or this can be my backup plan if I fail to get into this. But the takeaway is that both journals seem to work. If I look at their papers, it's similar to the paper that I'm writing about. So I can consider these 2 journals, which are both hybrid journals that I can publish for free in. Okay, another way to publish for free is look for collaborators who have funding. So here in this paper, I publish in open access because my collaborator is actually from the Public Health Agency of Canada that is willing to pay for the open access. Here, my collaborator is Professor Raban from Saudi Arabia, who's also willing to pay for the open access. So if you can try to find collaborators, or I can introduce them to you if you have a paper that is in this field. Yeah, but generally there are collaborators out there who's willing to pay for the paper, provided if you collaborate with them, including their name in the paper. So part 5 is about contacting journal editor and passing the peer review process. Okay, so when you contact the editor, it's best to write a cover letter when you're going to submit your paper to avoid DAS rejection. DAS rejection means that before your paper gets into the peer review, the editor of a journal rejects your paper and don't send your paper for peer review. So best to avoid that. So your cover letter wants to convince the editor that your manuscript is important and how your manuscript can contribute to the journal. As simple as that. Just 2 points is usually enough because editor, they are busy, they don't have time to read very long letters. So just keep it short. Sometimes the journal submission website, they ask you to recommend peer reviewers. And even though it's optional, it's best to recommend some to show that the editor, that you are sincere, that you're willing to make the editor's life easier. And you can recommend reviewers from the papers you cite. Usually, if you cite papers, just go to the paper that have a corresponding author that puts their email in the paper. You just take that email and recommend it. You don't have to ask for permission or anything. And you have your boss is always right mentality. Your editor is your boss. Check the journal's instruction for authors, means that author guidelines before you submit to make sure that paper is a good fit and it fits the journal requirements. So it's basically just be a professional and read the rules before you submit a paper. So here are some examples of cover letter. So here's my cover letter to reviews in medical virology. So at first I convinced why this paper is important. I said that in light of the growing interest of this condition, this review categorizes and proposes 6 subtypes. At least to our knowledge, this has not been done in detail. So thus we believe this review contribute to the epidemiological and treatment aspects of the journal scope and aim. So just 2 points. One is why is your paper important? And second, how your paper contribute to the journal. But yeah, sometimes they have instruction for cover letter. Sometimes the journal have instructions for cover letter. They want me to specify that I have not published this or submitted this work elsewhere. I have no conflict of interest and address correspondence. So that's why it's good you have to read the journal guidelines for authors before you write your cover letter. And for this ACS chemical neuroscience, it's the same thing. I convinced why my paper is important, how my paper will contribute to the journal field of neuroscience. And I provide a layman summary, means like a summary for the journal audience, a short summary, because the journal requires me to put this in the cover letter. So make sure you read the author guidelines in the journal so that you don't miss things like this. So this is your cover letter, and don't be like this. Make sure you deliver what you promise in your cover letter. Past peer reviewing journal is 1 to 3 reviewers. It used to be 2 or 3, but nowadays 1 reviewer is getting more common, probably because researchers don't do unpaid work anymore. And there's usually 4 outcomes: rejected, major revision, minor revision, or accepted. But accepted without revision is not a good sign. It means that the journal is not doing its job. No matter how good the paper is, there's always something to revise. Have the customers are always right mentality. Your peer reviewers are your customers. They don't get paid to do peer review. And they're just there to make the science better. And the key is to make reviewers know that they have been heard. So try to address their concerns and comments adequately. And if you should you disagree, try to disagree politely. And the common revision they ask if your argument is flawed, some citations, some important studies that I didn't cite, poor English, a flaw in overall structure, this is the hardest to address, or the content is too basic, that their review paper is a common review paper that has been written before, then they might ask you to elaborate more on certain areas. And use the word track changes function in the word, or color words to indicate what kind of changes you make. But the most important part is to keep your drafts clean so that it's easy for the peer reviewer to see what kind of changes you have made. Okay, some examples here. So for this peer reviewer, for this paper, I encountered an expert review, who's actually one of the key figures in the field. So it gave me a very lengthy, it's more than this that I have to address, but my supervisors and I have to address. But generally, we always agree with the reviewer. We agree, we have revised, we agree, and we have revised. Try to do what the reviewer wants, even if they sometimes take it personally. Like here, they accuse, they accuse us that our statement seems to belittle the scientific literature that has been done. And maybe that's true, but yeah, sincerely apologize, let's be polite. It was not our intention to belittle. So even if the peer reviewers take out personally, try to be professional and don't be personal with their peer reviewer. Just agree and disagree politely. Yeah, here's a continuation. Yeah, same thing. We agree, thank for putting the error. Yeah. And sometimes there's round two. If the round one, if the peer reviewer is not satisfied in round one, but round two is usually shorter if you have done round one correctly. And sometimes they point out genuine errors you made. So here the peer reviewer pointed out that my statement is still not correct, despite revising the statement in round one, and asked us to read the paper more carefully. So we agree and apologize for the error. From the looks of it, the peer reviewer is not as strict as the first round, probably because we are polite, we were professional. So being polite and professional is important during peer review. Here's an example. It's a very short comment, but requires a major change in the structure that asks us to change this to a systematic review and meta-analysis, which is quite hard to do. So I disagree, or we disagree. But when you disagree, make sure you disagree politely and explain why did you disagree. So we did not perform a true systematic review because we think this review topic is more suitable as a narrative review. Narrative review means traditional review paper, that is just literature review. And we did not register a systematic review protocol in Prospero, which is the standard practice. So converting this review to a systematic one at this point may create bias. So I try to explain properly, but for the rest, try to agree for the review comments. And here's the last example. So sometimes your paper is very good, have minimal errors. You still have revisions, but they'll be easy to address. So this peer review only asked me to explain certain points in more detail. And I just passed peer review just like that, because this paper is a good one. It's a meta-analysis paper of the biomarkers in post-COVID. So sometimes you may met a peer review that is not as strict. So it actually depends on your luck. Yeah. So don't be like this. Try to at least spell check your paper. But generally make sure you submit your best work before the peer review see your work. And so to let the reviewer see that you've done your best. And to make the reviewers feel like you took them for granted. Remember, they don't get paid. So they are practically like customers. They have to pay their time to review paper. And yeah, these are the hurdles I encounter, sometimes with difficult and strict peer reviewers, but not all processes are like this. The first time is always the toughest, but writing and publishing gets easier over time. Like my last paper meta-analysis, where I just passed the peer review very smoothly. Yeah, so peer review can be smooth and quick when you're experienced enough. So here I've done some final words. So one is to write something meaningful. If you write something that you care about, something that's important to you, you're more likely to keep writing. Your first draft is not going to be perfect or great, but it gets better with more revisions and practice. And after finalizing the draft, read everything one more time. You'll be surprised at how sometimes 2 sentences or 2 paragraphs don't really connect each other if you read the whole thing at once. So try to read just one more time. And make it a masterpiece so that I can be proud and confident in your work. Yeah. So what the writer usually do, just stressing on your desk. I still feel this way. At this point, I still feel this way, especially halfway through the draft. But it feels good if you have completed the first draft, because what doesn't kill you is going to die. But if you start a new project, you're just going to go back to this state. So it's like an endless cycle. But that's how writing is usually. So I'd like to close with this. This is a scientific writing talk by Dr. Ginger. It's actually from YouTube. Yes, YouTube scientific writing, and you'll see her. And she mentioned that she told a story that initially when she started as a PhD student, she thought that her future career mostly involved lab work. But after she graduated and becoming a lead investigator, a principal investigator, she realized that she spent most of her time writing. I think it was more than 70% of her time writing presentations, writing lectures, grant proposals, research articles, peer review, etc., etc. So she also shared a few thoughts about writing. They said that no matter what career path you take, Logical and carefully crafted writing is essential. Organization, content, and spelling and grammar are always important, and no one will take you seriously if you have poor English. Even they can see in your email. If you craft a good email, the recipient will always have a good impression of you. Writing is improved by revision and continual practice. And writing about a topic helps you gain a clear understanding of the material. So as Dr. Jordan Peterson said the same thing, the further up the ladder of competence you climb, with your well-formulated thoughts, the more important thinking and communicating become. At the very top of the most complex hierarchies, law, medicine, academia, business, theology, and politics, nothing is more necessary and valuable. So learn to write, especially when you're young, learn to write early, so that you'll be a key weapon or tool in your arsenal in the future. So that's all. Thank you for your attention, and happy to accept questions.